The last couple of weeks we've been doing the four callings of Peter. We won't go back over it, but something happened last week, and I mentioned something about the bride of Christ and how over the years I've had contact with men who kind of like freak out that they're part of the bride of Christ. You know, it would be a good thing to spend a few weeks or more talking about things like that, the different things in the New Testament that the church is actually called, because there's a lot of them. It's not saying that we don't know who we are as the church, but I think there may be some things that God would like to reveal to us about the church that he's building and about these various different types and symbols that I'm thinking that because it was in prayer when I was praying, and that's kind of like what I was feeling like God was downloading to me. So I'm beginning a series, like I said this week, on that spiritual entity, if you would. I'm going to use the word church, but church is just one of probably 12 to 15 someplace in that area. Different words that we're going to kind of like look at who said what, when, and where, and all that kind of stuff. I'll call it a series on the church because that works as good as anything. And really what's in my heart is to like identify, you know, the calling, the quality, the mission, the values, a variety of different things. And that's kind of where we're at. There's a spiritual entity that Jesus is building, creating, that he has been since he said he would. And I think it'll be worthwhile just taking a look at what is it? You know, what is that kind of thing? I guess it kind of ties into one of Peter's callings, you know, you're son of John. And Peter would have said, yeah, I know that. I know who my dad is. But then he says, but you're called, which he's using in a twofold capacity. I'm renaming you. Now your name will be Cephas. You will be Little Rock. I'm not saying you won't be your dad's son anymore, but you're going to become a little rock like I'm a rock. You're going to become Cephas, Peter. The world is going to say all kinds. I'm the one who's calling you this. So that's kind of where we're coming from a bit. There's only two places that Jesus even uses the word church. The word church is the one we're going to kind of zero in on today, in Matthew 16 and 18. And we're going to read one of those two passages. The only two places in the Gospels. We know that in Revelation, the church is mentioned a lot, but I'm talking about the Gospels. In all four Gospels, the church, the word is never mentioned in Mark, John, Luke. Don't know if you ever noticed that. And it's only mentioned twice in Matthew. One passage that we're probably very familiar with, and another one not so much. Let me throw this question out here. I'm wondering, what's the first word or the first thing that comes to mind when you hear church? A gathering, okay, commune. Bricks, okay. Religion, preach. It's interesting that the two dictionaries I have are Webster's and Collins, and both of them begin with the same two words. When you look up church in the dictionary, the first two words are a building, which shouldn't be all that, because people do say, I'm going to church today, which is kind of funny. If we recognize the church as people, that's kind of a strange saying. I think a lot of people, they hear church and they think of a building, which sounds kind of funny, doesn't it? Because I'm writing to the building at Corinth. I'm writing to the building at Ephesus. It'd be like, what? That doesn't even make any sense. I guess what I'd start this whole series by saying, definitions have changed. And when definitions change, people get confused and go more with the definition. In other words, a lot of the arguments I've had about same-sex marriage. But if you look in dictionaries, and I've got old dictionaries that define a marriage as a union between a man and a woman, but about. If you look at the new definitions after like 1992, 93, 94, it identifies as a marriage as being between two people. It doesn't say male and female anymore. In other words, they've changed the definition of marriage to suit what they want. Now, when I say the they is a combination of human pride and the enemy. Let's put it that way, okay? So it's a nice marriage going on there, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. So they changed the definition to facilitate where they want to take our children, grandchildren, and everybody else on this planet. And I see, in a very subtle way, the same thing has happened with church. Because the people of God started building buildings, they didn't originally. It wasn't until the 4th century when they started actually putting up buildings with somebody in front, talking to a whole bunch of people. I mean, kind of what we do here is what the church enjoyed for the first few hundred years. This was kind of what they did. They met in homes or out in the park or, wherever. That's not the point. The point is that the actual definition has been changed. Because, see, if the church doesn't know they're the church and they think it's a building, it completely wipes out their effectiveness on the planet. I mean, it doesn't even make any sense when you say the church is supposed to reach the world. Well, how am I going to move that thing at the quarter north wind? What are you talking about? In other words, once we buy into something that we are not, and we say that's what we are, we're done. And that becomes intriguing to me, because if Jesus says, well, yeah, I get that, but actually I'm still building a church. I'm actually doing something. And I know what you're doing, and I love you, and I always will. But that's not what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. And that's kind of where I'm coming from, is the more that we are able to identify what Jesus actually meant, what Paul, you hear him striving really in the same way as Jesus. In Jesus, some of his parables, what can I liken the kingdom of heaven to? Now, he's not foolish, he's not an idiot, but trying to actually bring the revelation of the kingdom of heaven and put it in terms that mean something to us. It's like this or it's like that. And you see Paul doing the same thing. He talks about the church. He's writing to the church all the time and says, don't you know that you're the temple of God? Don't you know you're a building, that you're stones that are actually being built together? Don't you know you're the bride of Christ? Don't you know that you're the city of God? And he goes on and on with all these different things. And by the time, I don't know how many there are, I haven't counted them. So it must be, being who we are, this spiritual entity, must be kind of like a little tricky to really put down on paper, because the closest people to God, God himself, are saying, how can I actually get you to know who you really are and what I'm doing? So I'll use earthly things that I believe I can bring a spiritual message to you through. And that's what he does. Matthew 16, Would you read? It's a familiar passage, verses 13 through 18.
When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah."
Yeah, let's hold on there a minute. That Caesarea Philippi, does that mean anything to anybody? I mean, you know anything about Caesarea Philippi? If you take the E and the A off of Caesarea, what do you got? Caesar. Okay? So this is an area of land that Caesar, basically, the Romans, had laid claim to as a place for their Roman gods to be worshipped. Herod actually built a temple there to Caesar so that the Jews would worship Caesar in the temple that was there. There was another temple there that the Greeks had built in worship of Pan, who's their god of nature kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying it makes a huge difference, but it makes a little bit of a difference, because they would have been looking out at, like, you know how you've seen those Roman busts of guys, their heads in ivory and all that kind. They would have had those in various places. So Jesus is looking and seeing the Romans represented, and it's actually named Caesarea. The Greeks have their temple there. All this stuff that is in almost like complete denial of the one true God. And here he is. And he's not crying. He's not crying about the mess. But he knows that somebody at some point has got to say what's actually going on here. And if it's not going to be the guys that are walking with him, if they're not going to have a voice in their community and in their neighborhood and everything else, I mean, he's just asking, so who do people say I am? Would you start from there?
"Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." Then he asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "You are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. Now I say to you that you are Peter," which means rock, "and upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it."
There's a lot in there, and we're not going to go into a lot. Just the fact that Jesus said, "I will build my church." He didn't say to those guys, you're going to build. I will build my church. It's just like with the calling to Peter, I will make you. I will build my church. Now it becomes kind of funny because, like I said to you, that word church is not mentioned at all in all four Gospels. This is one of two places that Jesus refers to the church. So then it becomes kind of interesting. It's sort of like, well, if Jesus only used the word twice, how is it that after that, once you get to the book of Acts and following, it's used all over the place kind of thing? And nowadays, it is the word that we use the most. I mean, where did Jesus get this word from, church? It's the Greek word ekklesia. But, is there a meaning to the word? And why do we use it so much? It's not like I want to thoroughly get into answers today, but just kind of, this is sort of like the way I think. I guess I've been tired for a while now of just taking things that come down the pike and and being a zombie Christian. I'm more like looking into things and saying, Lord, what does this mean? Why is that? I really think the words of Jesus, we really need to take kind of like seriously. And when he said he would build it, he didn't say, I am building my church. He said, I will build my church. Because Jesus was very clued up as to what was necessary to take place before you could even lay the foundation, which was himself, right? Jesus is the foundation. So he's saying, I'm going to build. There's going to be a building, there's going to be a church built on me. I'm going to build it. So that's where we're starting from in this whole series. I will build my church. The word that he used is not an unusual word in his day. Anytime a group of people were called together to the same place, a gathering, for a purpose, that was called an ecclesia. It was just, a gathering. So that is the nature of an ecclesia. So Jesus wasn't using a word that was unusual, but he was using it in a little different of a way when he's saying, I'm going to build my church. I'm actually going to have a gathering of people for a purpose, something that I am going to do. So the word isn't a word that Jesus pulled out of the air that had no meaning in his day. Quite the opposite. Everybody sitting there that day would have said, oh, so Jesus is calling us together. The four callings of Peter, he's calling us together. That's what he's doing. And he's got a purpose. After Jesus said that, I will build my church. After that, the people of God, the spiritual entity that Jesus laid down his life for, was committed to, and everything else. This spiritual entity, Paul, James, John, the whole bunch of them, they got a hold of that because that's what Jesus was building. Why would you call it anything else other than what Jesus said he was building? It's an ecclesia. It's a gathering. It's a group of people. It's not the meeting itself. It's the people that are there. In other words, for any one of us to say, well, I've got a really good relationship with God. It's all about me and him. That, to me, I won't call it demonic. I call it more misinformed, perhaps. Because it's not just about Steve Cerone's personal relationship with Jesus. That's an important part of an ecclesia, that we all have personal relationships, don't get me wrong. But the ecclesia, what Jesus said he was building, he didn't say, I'm going to be building personal relationships between each person on the planet and me. As important as that is, he was saying, I'm going to be building personal relations. I'm going to be building an ecclesia. I'm going to be building a people that are so intrinsically connected. What we're going to see, which is it may be a bit surprising, alarming, whatever, all of these different types that we get in the New Testament, they're all corporate. A body, a building, all these different things are corporate in terms of there's a community that Jesus is building.